Hello, my name is Will Zellinger. I attend Florida State College at Jacksonville, and this is my presentation on fundamentals of business communication. So people commonly ask, what is communication? Newman defines communication as the process of sending and receiving messages, sometimes through spoken or written words, and sometimes non-verbally through facial expressions, gestures, and voice qualities. Now, imagine how a business would operate if there was no communication. It wouldn't operate very well at all. There'd be no way for a business to get their messages across to each other or their customers. Effective communication is the base of a successful business. The goal of a business is to have their ideas, needs, expertise, and plans heard, which can only be accomplished through communication. Without effective communication, this information cannot be received appropriately and the business will not be as successful. Therefore, it is essential that businesses use clear, appropriate, and well thought out communication that is directed to the specific target audience. So, how do we do this? To communicate effectively, we must first understand the components of communication in the communication model. The picture that I have on this slide is the communication model. Now, the communication model simplifies the components of communication to include the need for communication, the sender, the message, the target audience, and the response of the audience. When an individual business has an idea that they want to deliver, this is when they need to develop a need of communication. The first component of the communication model that we are going to cover is the sender. Now, as the sender of the message, there is a lot to consider. You must consider the context of the communication, such as, is it a formal or informal setting? And also, what language is appropriate for the audience? And are there any ethical issues that might arise from your message? You must determine who the target audience is and how they will react. Also, you must determine what objective goals are of your communication. Are you trying to reach, teach, persuade, or provide and receive feedback? Based on all these factors, the sender must then determine what the most effective form of media to use for the best communication. Once these factors are chosen by the sender, then the message can be created and delivered effectively. Newman states that the message is the information that needs to be communicated. Now, there are three different forms of messages: oral, written, and nonverbal. Oral messages include staff meetings, individual meetings, conversations over the phone, voicemails, podcasts, conference calls, and sometimes even through the grapevine. Written messages include emails, reports, blog posts, web pages, brochures, social media, and newsletters. Now, nonverbal messages include facial expressions, gestures, and body movements. Each type of message is appropriate for different situations. I'll talk more later on what form of messages are appropriate for what situations. You, as the sender, must consider who the audience is and how they will interpret and react to your message. To do so, you must consider many factors, one of which is who your audience is and what is your relationship with this audience. What knowledge and experience do they have? What is their background? What are their ethical views? Based on these, you should be able to determine how to deliver your message so that your audience responds as desired. With a response from the audience begins a new message to deliver. This starts the communication model from the beginning. The response from the audience must follow the same steps as the original message. This is to ensure that the message back is interpreted as desired. As I mentioned before, I'm now going to talk about the different forms of media and when to use them. When choosing the appropriate communication media, you must always consider your audience and who that is and what your objective goal is. Communication media can be broken down into two broad categories: traditional media and technology-based media. The traditional forms of communication media include written and oral. Brochures are an example of traditional written communication media. Brochures are useful to promote products and services. Brochures make it easy to provide customers with a readily available visual aid to highlight specific messages that the organization wants to promote. Oral communication includes face-to-face communication, such as meetings with one person or a group of people. This type of communication is the most effective and should be used if you are truly trying to build a relationship with your audience to get a stronger message across. Statistically, during face-to-face communication, 7% of meaning is conveyed through the actual words. 38% of meaning is through how the words are said, and that includes the tone of voice. And 55% of meaning comes through the facial expression. This makes oral communication the most effective because the audience is getting the visual message as well as the spoken message. Technology-based communication media is used more often due to its becoming more prevalent in society. This type of communication occurs through email, phone and voicemail, instant text messaging, and majorly through social media. Email and phone and voicemail are the most conventional forms of technology-based media and are typically chosen over face-to-face communication. This is because it often offers the ability to send quick messages when the audience is not within close proximity. Instant messaging are often used for the communicating short and quick messages and allows for a quicker response because the sender and receiver know when they are both available. Text messaging is most informal but can be useful. Some of the main uses are for confirmation messages, reminders and alerts, fast client contact, and important messages for meetings. Social media is an effective way to promote interactions with an organization. Social media opens the door to an extremely large audience, as it is found to have over 3 billion users who follow more brands on social media than celebrities. Social media provides a wide range of ways to connect, engage, and grow your business. Now that you have the communication media chosen, the message is to be prepared. When doing so, the sender should keep in mind any communication barriers. Based on your audience's background, knowledge, and beliefs, there will be many different potential barriers to all messages sent. There are two types of communication barriers: verbal and nonverbal. Verbal communication barriers include inadequate knowledge or vocabulary, differences in interpretation, language differences, inappropriate uses of expressions, over abstraction, and ambiguity. Not all of the member of your audience will have the same level of knowledge. Your message should be clear and straightforward, but should still appreciate a level of formality and sophistication. Different members of your audience will interpret the information differently, such as term or phrase that mean one thing to someone could have some completely different meaning to someone else. You should also be aware to not use any slang, jargon, or euphemisms, as they can be misunderstood depending on the background of your audience. In addition to keeping the message clear and simple, concrete words, meaning something that can be seen or touched, should be used more often than abstract words. In addition to the verbal communication barriers, nonverbal barriers also affect the interpretation of this information. Nonverbal barriers include inappropriate or conflicting signals, differences in perception, inappropriate emotions, and distractions. Your message should be as error-free as possible. The appearance of the sender and the message should be organized and appropriate. Too much emotion in your message should be avoided as it could hinder the communication objective. The audience may form different perspectives of the message depending on what their background, knowledge, and experience includes. Finally, distractions such as noise play a big role in communication delivery because it causes an inattention to the message being sent and received. In order to avoid communication barriers as much as possible, be sure to prepare the message in advance and take the time to make sure it is error-free, concise, and appropriate language for your audience. You should take the time to proofread and revise as necessary. While doing so, you should cycle back to the beginning of the communication model. Consider what your objective is for the message. Make sure that your media of your communication is appropriate for your audience. Consider any verbal or nonverbal communications barriers that could be present. This is the last step before delivery, and it's essential for effective communication to ensure that your audience interprets the message how you desire. It is not quick and easy to deliver business communication. However, it is imperative to a business's success that it is done so effectively. There are many components to effective communications, as I've discussed before. The communication model delivers the fundamentals of business communication. If the sender follows that model, then they will be set up for effective communication. Furthermore, they must really analyze the audience to ensure that the message is interpreted as intended and eliminate as many communication barriers as possible. Lastly, be sure you proofread your product several times before finalizing to ensure it is error-free. Hey, now you're ready to deliver effective business communication.